Thank you for rejoining us for part 3 of bringing relationships onto the path. This is part 3 of 4. Please make yourself comfortable.
So, are there any questions, more questions about this morning? Before we move on to something else. I mean, on the same subject, but another aspect. Is there anything anyone wants to ask or say, or no? It's clear? Yeah. Yeah, well, understanding is a good foundation, but then, applying is a bit more difficult, but still possible. Okay, well, then maybe we can move forward to how we can deal with all this, and improve our capacity of feeling more, or even defining what love truly is. And by defining what love is, we will be able to see what love isn't, by definition. So, according to the Buddhist teachings, where we can find these teachings about the 4 boundless feelings or emotions, or they say often we translate by the 4 boundless thoughts, but it's not really a thought, it's more like an attitude or a feeling or an emotion, which are actually it's 4 aspects of one feeling, one global feeling of, one could say, kindness, tenderness, or something like that. It's generally exposed in 4, expressed in 4 aspects, which are love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And this is the foundation for all human relationships. Like, if we were talking at lunch, and there's an example that I sometimes, reflected upon. In the teachings, we often are told that, like, because we have been reborn countless times in this existence of human or other existences, all beings have at one time or the other been our mother. I don't think you have to take it literally, but this is meant to express that there is a strong connection, and the person, perhaps the person that is now harming you, or, with whom you have problems, has been a close relative or someone who has even really taken care of you or saved your life, or at other times. Even during the same lifetime, this might happen. But if you think in a broader scope of time, then it has very likely happened, And if we do this sort of exercise, imagine that someone who is very dear to us right now harmed us in another lifetime, or someone who was very dear to us in another lifetime is now someone who is our boss, or things even more complicated than to fathom. Someone like, my husband has been my mother, or the opposite, my mother is now my husband, things like this. It becomes quite complex, because we then understand that, of course, we could love them, whether they have been our dog, or our husband, or our mother, or But then the sorts of love that we would feel, or the way we would engage with that person, is not the same if they have been our dog or our husband or our mother. And it would even, we would need perhaps, if we had this certainty that, for instance, our husband was our mother, we would have to go through years of therapy to be able to solve that problem in our head. But on the same time, what I mean by doing this is not creating another problem that I don't have right now, is to understand that and at a certain level, I don't love my husband like I love my mother. But if I go down to the ground level, in that level, there doesn't have to be any difference. It's just love. You know what I mean? So when they say all beings have been our mother, they're sort of pointing or directing us for that level on which what we feel for the beings can be the same, whatever they have been to us, or whatever type of relationship we have had with them, or have right now. See? So, for instance, certain attitudes would be totally displaced if that person was not my husband and was my dog, for instance. But the wishing well or the caring for would never be displaced, whatever that person means to me or whatever role is playing in my life right now or in the past. So if we then, on the top of that, we can build other things. And of course, then you can have all types of relationships, mother and child, husband and wife, whatever. But if that basis is not there, or if what we feel for someone is totally dependent on the type of relationship we have with that person, then something is missing. You understand what I mean? If I only wish well to someone because he is now my husband, but if he was to be reborn as someone else, I wouldn't feel anything. There wouldn't be anything left. There's something missing there. The basic thing is not there. So the relationships which are not when we base our relationships only on these role plays that we have with different people, and we don't have the basic goodness of wishing them well and caring for them, then things get out of balance, because then it's either one or the other. While he's my husband, I care for him, and once he's not, I just, ignore him or, want him to go to hell or something like that. Because then it's totally dependent on how much goodness or how much validation I get from them. And then once they don't validate me anymore, I don't give a damn. So that's wrong. Not from the moral point of view. It's wrong because if we feel in that way, relationships will never work. We will never have a satisfying relationship with anyone because we're just based on what they bring to us or what they can give in our life, and not in the true sense of caring and affection and friendship and all of that. So from this point of view, this common base feeling that we can have, and it's never misplaced with anyone, whether it's my canary or my dog, my pet, my friend, or my mother, or my father, or my husband, or my child, it's based upon this general feeling of what we could call basic goodness, or loving kindness, or something like that, which is wishing well, and which you can develop from 4 different approaches. The approach of love, approach of compassion, approach of joy, and then equanimity. That's the part where we understand that those feelings can be, absolutely no barrier, or there is no danger of any sort. We can really feel that towards everyone. But of course, that would mean that those who are more close to me, with whom I have an actual relationship, whatever it is, I have more responsibility to them than I have for others. So sometimes it works on the opposite, because if it's very much based on how much validation I get from the people, I often, if things go wrong, I would treat those who were closest to me much worse than I would treat others, because I'm so angry with them that now they're not validating me anymore. So this all shows that there is no balance there is no true grounding in our relationships, because they're totally dependent, or very much dependent, on how much validation I get from the people. And if I don't get, then I don't care about them. And that's really a sign that we are not grounding our relationships on a true feeling, or a true emotion, a true relationship. So how can we describe or define these four? Well, equanimity, it's easy to understand. It means not making as much difference as we now make between friends and enemies, which boils down to say that having a set of feelings or for people, not depending so much on whether they validate us or not. You see what I mean? Because what separates in our mind enemies and friends is friends are those who bring something good to me, and enemies are those who don't bring anything good, and sometimes even bad things. So because it's totally self-centered, then we have a total different attitude towards one and the other. So it's here that I often ask or do myself this exercise of, those columns that I said, because we can easily understand that sometimes there are two possible exercises. One is, as I mentioned this morning, making two columns of people, of those who have hurt us the most, and those who have hurt us the most through love or these kind of relationships, and those who did it by being our enemies or by confronting us, and how they just jump from one row to the other quite quickly, and many times, sometimes more than once. But then there is another possibility, or another exercise which also helps, is to do a little bit the opposite, or reflecting about the people who were more important in our lives, or the people who really pushed us into changing into the person we are today, people and situations, if you want. And then you can make 3 rows, like those who did it by caring for others, for us, those who did it by challenging us with difficult situations, and those whom we never met, for instance. Could be, like we have read the book, for instance, or heard someone in the telly saying something, and suddenly woke up. There was this insight that came because I heard someone that I never met, doesn't even know I exist, but a doctor, or the guy of the ambulance who saved my life, and it means nothing to me. It meant nothing to me, and it means nothing to me now, but it was crucial. He saved my life. You know what I mean? So, and if you see like this, you can see that things are not the way we project them. We have this idea that friends are those who support us, and and they're so important. And then enemies are those who we would like to take out of our lives, and we really don't need them. And the people whom we don't know, we are totally indifferent. But we can, if you really analyze, we can find out that the most important people or the most crucial people in our lives could have been those who created challenges or difficult situations, because those situations was the ones who made us who we are right now, much more, or at least in a more visible way. I don't mean that those who cared for us are not important, but sometimes the true changes or real big changes come through, difficulties. And that maybe some people had a strong impact in our lives, people that we never met personally, we don't have any relationship with them, but they saved our lives, or they said something that deeply inspired us, or things like this. So it's not so easy, it's not so simple. So when we start doing all these exercises, and if we start reflecting on that, and if we add on the top of that the possibility that we have had all sorts of relationships with all sorts of people throughout different lives, then this idea of treating some people in a way and some other people in a totally different way, or having two sets of criteria because I am now in good relationship with this person and not with that one, doesn't have that much meaning. It doesn't mean that I will love my enemy as I like my friend, but there is no fundamental reason why I shouldn't wish him well in the same way. I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm going to knock at his door and come with a cup of tea, my best Darjeeling tea, first flush, to the person who is making my life a hell. But there is no reason either for me to want him to have a car accident or or something like that. So that's the thing. It's not that we have to have the same feelings of tenderness and caring. If we can, that's even better. But at least is to say that because of circumstances, if right now they're not the most kind people to me, it doesn't mean that they won't be in the future or they haven't been in the past. And even there might be, even if I don't have a good relationship with them right now, it doesn't mean they're not contributing to my welfare by their activity, for instance, or professionally, or something like this. There's no guarantee that, that neighbor that really makes my life a hell because he puts, music very loud or something like that. Perhaps he is the guy who is driving the ambulance. Who knows? And maybe he will save my life, or he's a fireman. So there is
still some game we are imagining.
No problem, because how can I say this? We don't have to aim to the top. We have to correct our attitudes based on how we now understand things. You know what I mean? So if in order to have a little bit more kindness to the people, we have to go through this idea that they may benefit us somehow, it's okay. Because if you don't use that, you will never feel a little bit kinder towards these people. So once you get to that stage, if you find yourself a little bit more willing to, appreciate, or then maybe you can have another step. It's like that story of the Buddha and this man who was very rich but also very stingy. And he went to see the Buddha and said, well, I really enjoy your teachings. You're a great teacher, and I really feel very inspired when you teach, but there is something you keep repeating, and it gives me the creeps. Is when you say that one should be generous. I get sick just by the thought of giving something away. So I'm very sorry because I feel that you're such a great teacher, but I will never be able to follow your teachings. And the Buddha said, well, that's not so sure. Do you think you could, give something to yourself? The guy is a bit puzzled, Yeah, why not? I mean, what do you mean? He said, okay, let's make a test. You go home and you sit somewhere, preferably where nobody sees you. You will look like a loony. And you take something and on your left or right hand, doesn't matter, and then you give it to your other hand. And when you give it, you say, take it. And then once it's in your right hand, you give it to your left hand and you say, take it. And then you keep doing this, 1 hour a day, you go somewhere and do take it, take it, take it, take it. I mean, who wouldn't feel silly doing such a stupid thing? And in a way, one could say that, there's no point in doing that, because, what does it mean, give to yourself? But the fact is, by doing that, you became more and more comfortable with it. In the beginning, he said, then he came 1 month later, and the Buddha asked, so how is it going, And he said, well, no, I became comfortable with that. In the beginning, giving to myself was not too much of a deal, but saying take it was really difficult. Then now I'm comfortable. So the Buddha gave him something a little bit more difficult. Now you should, when you're eating, you take something that you don't like and you put it aside, and then you give it to the birds, And then it was again a challenge. But after a while, he became comfortable with that. And at the end, he actually was then afterwards called Ananta Pindika or something like that, which in Sanskrit meant the generous one or the protector one, because he became the most generous of all the Buddhist disciples. He built, schools and hospitals and hospices, and he was extremely rich, and so he could really help people in a very generous way. But he started with a very stupid thing, in a sense. So I think we also have to be humble enough to say, if I cannot do anything which won't have some sort of benefit for myself, that's where I start. And if I can start there, it's a small step, but, little by little.
We have to begin from where we are.
Exactly, and have to have this, the humility of understanding where we are, and accepting to start there. And not pretend that we are some other level, because if we pretend that, then we reach nowhere. We go nowhere because we're not there. So how can we start there? So that's the thing. So it's all exercises. None of this is absolute truth. It's just making our mind create a scenario that will untighten or slightly shift the scenario that I have right now. And once I know where I want to go, I just introduce a few clues and shift a little bit. It's not perfect, it's not the end, but it's a little bit better. And, going like this, we start feeling different. Then equanimity is also about not making that much difference between ourselves and the others. In the sense, of course, there's all sorts of levels, but just to start with, not feeling that you are any better or any worse than anyone else. Just feeling that we're all human beings, we are flawed by this thing that we discussed this morning, this sense of frustration, of lacking something. So, we're all driven by the same needs for things to validate our existence, because we deeply understand that this thing to which we cling as being me doesn't truly exist. So there is a sense of, panic It's a bit like, you know, sometimes you see movies that explore these sort of things, but, you know, like imagine that you are in a train accident and there was this woman in your carriage that exactly looked like you know, and you are a fugitive or something like that. So she dies and you take her identity, you know, and you go around with her passport. And it's true, it's the same face, so nobody will challenge you. But then one day someone comes and says, "Oh, so-and-so, how are you?" And then you feel strange, you feel awkward because you are afraid that person will understand that you are not the one you pretend to be. So there is, the ego has a little bit this sense of, you know, of not being exactly who he is or who he pretends to be, and then that it might be discovered. So he's looking for validation constantly, so that he sort of rests assured that there's no threat around and everybody is convinced that he exists. You see, it's a bit a state of panic in a way. So we're all like that, and we're all in that state. So of course, the things we do, we are not necessarily bad people, fundamentally, but we do bad things because, you know, we are afraid, because we are angry, because we are attached, because so many different reasons. But in that, we are all in the same boat. You know, others and me and my friends and my enemies and all these people around me, we're all in the same boat. So there is not that feeling of, you know, when we sometimes say, yeah, people do this and people do that, and I'm not at all like that, you know, I am totally honest and I am this or I am that, and until in the next turn, perhaps we will, in the next 5 minutes, we will see ourselves doing exactly the same thing that we were criticizing 5 minutes before. So when we start observing all these things, we understand that there is no need to feel that we are better or worse than anyone. We're just in the same sort of difficult situation as anybody else. And so equanimity is pretty much about this, understanding that as human beings, flawed by this sense of instability and uncertainty and frustration that we are all in, independently from the circumstances being more favorable or more unfavorable, we are all in the same situation. So we are all capable of doing wonderful things, as we are all capable of doing awful things. and so there is not that need for judging and, you know, and condemning or proving or... Yeah, of course, there are certain things we see happening around us, or even in us, that we certainly know that they're not wholesome, or they're not good, or they're harming, but we don't have that strong idea of condemning or morally evaluating them. There might be lots of reasons for that to happen that we have no clue about, you know. So it's like the benefit of doubt, you know. We keep things a little bit open and we understand that basically we're all the same. So equanimity, it's a bit like this. It's also the sort of thing we were talking about as, you know, this common ground of we being able, or we being able to wish well to anyone, independently of the relationship or we have with that person. Then come the three others: compassion, love, or love, compassion, and joy. Since we were talking about love since this morning, let's start with love. So it's very easy, actually, very simple definition in this context. Love is just the wish that others and ourselves, we could be happy and have the causes of happiness. It's what we repeat every, the beginning of the session. So it's wishing well, really. It's wishing that people might be happy and have the causes of happiness. It's very important, that part. Might seem a little bit redundant, because we are already wishing for them to be happy. Why go to that length of wishing for them to have the causes of happiness? Because you might be happy right now, but if you're happy doing things that harm others, we are just, exhausting your happiness and creating unhappiness. You know what I mean? So because you're creating causes for being unhappy, if your happiness, present happiness, is obtained by harming others, that can happen. In the short run, we might feel very well by obtaining something, but if that is obtained, creating unhappiness for others, it won't last. So it will be transformed. It will become.
So we're actually saying that you're wishing them be the cause of happiness, rather than saying that they're relying upon other things for the cause of happiness.
Yes, something like that. Yeah, we're wishing them to be happy in a wholesome way. Being happy and creating happiness for themselves and others. So not a very selfish or self-centered sense of happiness. I am happy and I don't care if others are suffering. But something on the contrary, something in which you consider your welfare and the welfare of others as being equally important. Yeah? So that's it. Love could be defined as, wishing someone to be happy, to be well, to be wholesome, to create these causes, this environment where happiness can happen for him and for others. But then again, this also is complemented by compassion, which is defined as the wish for others not to have suffering, and the causes of suffering, to avoid, to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So both sort of complement each other, because then we wish happiness and then we wish that people don't suffer. So, like, for instance, wishing something bad to happen when we break up with someone we say we love is just the opposite of all of this, isn't it? It means that actually at that moment at least, it doesn't mean that it always had been like that, but at that moment at least, our ego is louder than our caring or our compassion or our love. It doesn't mean that it will remain like that, and maybe we will come to our senses later on, but at that moment, the ego shouts louder because he's really pissed off that things are not working for him. And then joy, which is rejoicing. We could speak of joy a little bit with a feeling or an emotion that starts with gratitude. It's just rejoicing, enjoying, be grateful for whatever we have. We can start by being grateful for the good things, and then if we really practice gratitude, we might even get to the point where we are grateful even for the not so good things, but for the result of dealing with them and how that made us the person we are, or better person. It happens, and it's not that rare, and even it happens in extreme situations, like people who have been in, for instance, during the Second War, people who were in those camps or things like this. Some came out, most of them died, but some came out very angry and very bitter and very, with humanity or something. But some truly came out better persons and feeling absolutely grateful for Mm-hmm.
You wrote a book.
That book. Oh, okay.
Man's search for meaning.
The man's search for meaning.
The what?
Man's search for meaning.
Oh, yeah.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Not very long.
Yes. So there are good examples of that, or other things. There's all sorts of atrocities going on in our planet, and many people who came out of these sort of extreme experiences more compassionate and more human and more, so it's possible. So
It works with nearly every negative experience.
everything, yes.
Nearly always, but there's that. You have to wait.
Yeah.
So if you look back at it.
Sometimes it's quite immediate, but then you really have to have, how can I say this? Sometimes it's just also circumstances allow that to happen more quickly or less quickly. But if you are a very trained person or a person who has naturally an open heart, and then it can happen more quickly. But it quite often happens afterwards. After you have been through the hardest part. But anyway, I think joy starts with gratitude. You can start with gratitude for the good things, and that also is an exercise one can do to every day sort of have many people do this or have done or have heard, have a sort of diary of gratitude. Every day you write down one or two things which you're grateful for. And of course, if you start doing this, you'll probably come up with, big things. I'm grateful because I am healthy, or I am grateful because I have a great family, or I am grateful because... But then if you keep on doing it, then after a while you have used all your great gratitude things, and you'll have to go to the, more minute things that you can feel grateful for. And that can be, I'm grateful because there is sunshine today, or I'm grateful because this morning coffee was delicious, things like this. And actually, when you are going through hard times, sometimes small little things make up your day, isn't it? If you are struggling with a big disease or with a big crisis, just sitting down and drinking a delicious coffee might be the highlight of your day, and it might be a moment of true gratitude. I'm so grateful that I'm still alive, and that I can enjoy this coffee or something like that. We can really go to that extent. There is this advice of one of the greatest teachers in India from the Buddhist tradition, Nagarjuna, who saying that just waking up in the morning, there is a reason for being grateful for that. Many people died during that night, and I woke up. So in such a simple thing, that we may wake up grumpy and say, I didn't sleep well, but there's also another way to put it. I didn't sleep well, but I'm so grateful that I'm still alive, things like this. So joy comes, it might seem a very simple one, or even not a very important one compared to love or compassion. But it's actually perhaps sometimes even harder to feel this sort of joy, because there's lots of acceptance in this gratitude thing and in feeling joyful, and we tend to take for granted when you have for all those things that you consider as being normal. We don't feel grateful for them, or because we think it's normal, it's natural, everybody should have, or something like this. So everything in this sense is a matter of training, and it might feel strange, not for Buddhists, of course. You probably won't feel that, but people in general, they don't think they can train in gratitude or train in love or train in compassion, because it's a little bit like either you have it or you don't. But how can we train on that? But it's possible. It's just training means feeling it more often. That's just it. Because it all comes down to experience. So if you experience compassion once a day, you will slowly feel it. It will slowly come more easily. If you experience twice a day, it increases and it goes like this, I once there was someone from a Christian background that came to one retreat who was, there was a priest and and we were giving our own perspectives. And there was this lady who came from a more or less Christian background who said, what I like in Buddhism is that, for instance, if we go to the Mass and the Mass, anyway, you understand, Mass, okay. And you listen to the priest, or if you read the Bible, it says you should be, you have to love your neighbor. Yeah. But they never tell you how to do it. How can I come to love my neighbor? I know that I should, but if I don't, what can I do? And what I like in Buddhism is that they exactly show or advise or show how I can do to come to that. And I had never thought of things in that way, and I think that, that's true. It's not just enough to say to someone, you should feel love for everybody. And if I don't, what can I do, If some people might be born like that, it's their luck. But if you're not, or if what can we do? So what we can do is train in that. Find a way to feel that feeling more often during the day. And stick to it. Maybe even, sometimes in Tibetan Buddhism, there's lots of fuss about, prayers and mantras and, reciting and, everybody goes around with their mala to the point of having, a callus in their fingers. And I certainly did that in the 3 years retreat. We did, several hundred thousands recitations of a mantra. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that if you're not a prayer person, there's still lots of things you can do. And training in compassion or creating a sort of scenario that every day you can repeat or that you can adapt to a mental scenario, that will make you feel compassion or make you feel love. That's the thing, actually. And you can very easily do that. Thinking about someone you love already. And, there are all sorts of exercises. Thinking of that person, imagining that you wish that person well, or imagining the person suffering, and then how could you help? And of course, then there is a very important point, is that if you keep doing that with one person that you already love, then you won't progress that much, because that's the feelings you already have. So it's important to, after a while, or even after you have done that exercise and the feeling is there, then you can sort of think about someone else who won't be, perhaps, for whom those feelings won't be so natural, so automatic. But because it's already there, then, you're already favorably disposed, and then it's easy to bring someone else. It's like, you're having a nice chat with a friend, and everything is really, you're having a warm feeling. We're having a nice dinner and we had just a couple of glasses of wine, and then someone knocks at the door, and it's not exactly your favorite friend, but because it's already so friendly and everybody's so happy, then he comes and just mingles in the feeling. So it's a little bit like that. We create a scenario, we start the fire, so to speak, and then we can sort of bring other people, and bring friends which are not so close, and then slowly, little by little, depending on our character, bringing those with whom we have certain difficulties, and then, progressing like this until we are comfortable with bringing people with whom we have problems, or we had grave discussions, or serious matters, and it might sound impossible right now, because and we can see sometimes when we do this sort of exercises, sometimes we surprise ourselves, because we think, that person was really terrible when we break up, and I really had strong grudges, but now it's all gone and everything is settled and we feel we are friends again. And then you start doing the exercise, and when you think of that person, say, oh no, not him, or not her, then you realize it's not over, something is still there. But then on the other hand, the idea is not doing this as a psychotherapy. It's not in order to solve your problems with different stories or different people in your life. That's not the point. The point is creating, enhancing, and igniting a sense of kindness towards other people and towards yourself, actually. Some of us have to start with themselves before even starting with anyone else. And if your case is totally desperate and there is no one in your life that you feel love for, start with your pet. It's sometimes even much easier to start with your dog than to start with your mother. So it actually doesn't matter at all, because first, nobody will know. So you're totally comfortable by starting wherever you want. Nobody will know if you're starting with your mother or with your pet. And besides, as we said before, the idea is not that it's something morally acceptable or anything like that. It's the progress. You start where you are. And if there is absolutely no human being that can make you feel that sort of tenderness or that sort of feeling, warm feeling, well, your dog is if you don't have a dog, buy one. Because they're so cute. It's irresistible, There was, when I was researching, I have a dog right now, but when I wanted to have a dog, I did lots of researches about the best breed, And then I came to this website where there was this guy who was telling that he had Labradors, and his dog had just had puppies, yeah. So he had like 12 Labrador puppies at home. And then he couldn't just stay home all day, so he had to go and work. So he installed a camera with the IP address, so he could monitor what was happening at home when he was working at office. So he would search, and then he would see what the puppies were doing, and then for fun he just sent the address to one or two friends, saying, I have these puppies that are so cute, go and see at this address. And the people start sharing. And after a while, they realized there was sort of 100 people watching the puppies every day. And leaving comments, like, I can't start my day without go and check because they make me feel so good, They totally, I melt when I look at them, so they make my day, So I think it's a bit like this. If you don't have a dog and you don't really have anyone to start with, I don't think it's your case, but buy a dog.
When you get a person that you've got grievance with and you find it difficult to give compassion, could you give compassion with the dog and dog side by side? So find a fluffy animal.
I don't think I understood your question. Can you, not the meaning, I didn't understand what you said.
When you say give in the meditation compassion to the person that you have grievance with, someone that you don't like much, could you then imagine them with the dog?
Yes, absolutely.
Share the compassion and it surrounds them with the dog.
Absolutely. You start with the dog.
And put them together.
And then put them together. Yeah. Because, and there are two clues, tricks to make it sort of ignite faster. There are two feelings that make this easier. One is, that's the one mainly, the one that Tibetans use. It's gratitude. So they start with, the advice is to start with your parents or your mother, because they used to feel, it was very obvious for them, they never had issues with their parents, because it was very obvious for them that they ought to be grateful to their parents for giving them life, education, bringing them up, and all of that. We are not at that point, because now in the West, whenever Tibetan teachers say something like, you should feel grateful to your parents, or you should imagine your mother, and there's immediately 10 hands, raised and saying, but I hate my mother, I can't stand my mother, and it doesn't matter really. But what I mean is, it's this sense of gratitude. If you have someone whom you feel, whether it's your mother or anyone else, whom you feel has been very good to you, has really taken care of you, were there for you when you need it, then this is one starting point. Because you feel like so grateful that you really feel this person helped me so much when I needed, so now I'm here for that person. And I really want to pay back, to repay that kindness. That's one thing. Then there is another way of, in Tibetans, I don't know why, never speak about this, but I find for most Westerners it is even better than the first one, works better, not better, works better, is a sense of protection. That's the kind of feeling we have towards our children or our pets. That we can sort of protect them or protect them. We might feel that with our parents when they become old also, because they are less able, and then we can, do things for them and protect them and cherish them because we are in a sort of better situation or something like that. So that's another thing. And then there's a third thing related to creating or generating compassion, or the feeling of wanting to relieve someone from suffering, is remembering a situation where we felt powerless to help someone. You know that feeling? You see someone suffering, you would really like to do something, but there's nothing you can do. Yeah. And if you go back to a situation where you felt that, then very naturally the sense of, compassion comes, what can I do? It doesn't have to be a torture, though. These feelings can be quite intense, but the idea is not beating yourself up or, making yourself suffer. That's not the idea. But it's also, sometimes when we start this, the feelings come, but they're very sort of, how can I say, the contrary of intense? Shallow? Yeah, or... Not subtle, just a little bit faint, But that's okay, but we should work on making them more present, more real, more intense. So remembering these sorts of situations, so using gratitude, using protection, using the sense of having been powerless to help someone can help making those feelings more real and more intense. And then spreading, that's the spreading, or adding people to it, and with different sorts of, to whom we have different sorts of relations, good, bad, all that, human beings, animals. So the most we can enlarge and work on our equanimity to level all of this, that it creates a general and a ground for on which we can construct or build all sorts of relationships, but with this sort of common ground. Even the ongoing ones, it will work for the relationships that we will start in the future, but even the ongoing ones will benefit from it, from grounding them on something like this. And you don't especially have to announce it in the newspaper. It's something you do on yourself, do on your own, and nobody knows. So it might be quite the people around you, and especially those with whom you are more closely connected, will start feeling the difference after a while if your attitude changes. They won't know why, but it will be there, and things can quite radically change. There is this wonderful story that Rinpoche sometimes tells about this young bride, Indian bride. Now we have an Indian lady here with us today, and we have been eating in an Indian set, but there was this conflict with Indian girls and their mothers-in-law, because in this Indian system, the girl that married the boy lived in the house of the in-laws, and sometimes there was this, power games with the mother-in-law, and that particular young girl was, having some trouble with her mother-in-law, who was a bit bossy, and she was the kind that answers back, and doesn't stay quiet and really, fights back. So there was this thing, and the guy, of course, in these sort of situations, men are really helpless, they want to please both, and they don't know what to do, So it was growing very bad, and the girl was feeling awful, and it was almost to the point of breaking. So she once, after a fight with her mother-in-law, she was, walking in the street, and she said, "No, I have to kill her, because I will never have peace if I go on like this, and I will lose my husband, and I love him so much. So it can't go like this. I have to do something." And she was passing by some shop, and some sort of, shop where they sell all sorts of herbs and things like this. So she went in and saw the man and said, "Look, I need a poison. I need to poison my grandmother, my mother-in-law, because she makes my life a hell. The man in the shop was quite an old man, wise old man. So he said, okay, I mean, this is quite strange request, but you know, I mean, it's your life, so yes, why not? Then he goes, and you know, after a while he brings back a little flask of some green sticky substance, very suspicious, and he says, okay, this is sort of poison that you can put just a few. You're cooking for her? She says, yes, I cook for her. So every day you put just 1 or 2 drops on her food, and it won't show immediately, but slowly she will get sick, and then in the end she will die. And she said, oh, wonderful, how much do I owe you? And she's about to leave when the man says, wait a minute, you know, you are a very young person, so you don't have lots of experience in life. But I can tell you that since you have such difficulty in relating with your mother-in-law, there might be some suspicion about you having done something, because if she falls ill and everybody knows that you didn't get along and everybody knows that you're cooking for her, so that might be some suspicion. So I would advise you, from now on, try to be kind to her, And whenever she says something, don't immediately answer back, just say yes, okay, and try to be kind. And so whenever she dies, nobody will have any suspicion about you. And she said, oh yes, you're quite right, that's a very good idea. So she went back, she started putting the drops in the food, but then she started behaving in a totally different way, The mother-in-law would say, girl, bring me water, and then she would come and bring a cup of tea and said, here it is, thank you so much. And then, slowly the mother-in-law started realizing that the girl was changing, or that after all she was not that, so rude. She was could be quite nice, and then they started getting along better and better, By the end of the second week, she suddenly realized, as she was starting to really appreciate the mother-in-law and each other, she started to realize, oh, but there's only 1 week left. She's going to die. So I know perhaps her mother-in-law had drank something or ate something, and she wasn't feeling so well. So the girl was panicking, now I'm going to kill her, and she's such a nice person. So she went back to the man and in the shop and said, look, she was crying and she was desperate, and she said, look, I know I came and asked you this, but is there any counter poison to what you gave me? Because, I'm desperate. She's such a nice person after all, and now she's going to die because of me. And the man said, well, I have to confess something. The liquid I gave you is totally harmless, but I knew that if you put my advice in practice, it would change. So I was just, it was just a skillful means. So she was totally relieved, and they lived happy ever after. But that's it, If we practice these things, practice in the sense, get used to these feelings, and they become more natural, and they become the basis for all our relationships, whether they're long-standing or short-term, or just acquaintances, or the person our neighbor, or whatever. If this becomes the basis, then even the ongoing relationships will become better, easier, because even if the person is not aware, and even if he has no clue that we are doing anything, it will improve the communication, and everything will become smoother. And then all these validation issues that we are talking about this morning will just not vanish in 1 second, but they will slowly become less important. And the part of caring and, really wishing well and understanding the other person's point of view and all of that will sort of take over. And slowly things improve considerably, and our natural quality of caring and being nice and, what we were talking about in the beginning also, that the things that we won't do for ourselves, we are totally capable and even happy to do for others. All of this will just naturally unfold, because that's what we are naturally made of, And validation is just an illusion. I mean, it comes from something that is totally illusory, and it will slowly lose the strength. It won't vanish just in one go, but it will slowly lose the power. Yeah. So there's lots of hope. In one sense, if we take it from the ego point of view, there is absolutely no future in relationships. It's just, it's something that you can't win. But if you look at it from the goodness point of view, of basic goodness, then there is all reasons to be hopeful. Because then if we take this approach, the fact that we have to deal, or that we have relationships and we have to deal with people, is exactly what we need to put it into practice. And it doesn't remain like something theoretical that you have this idea in the ideal world or something like that. Every day of your life you have to choose between ego or love. And if you choose love, most of the times, then everything will go well, Actually, whenever there is some dispute or something in between people, we can always say to ourselves, okay, here is an occasion to either choose ego or love. Love, compassion, kindness, love as a general word. And if we see this through this angle, I think this is exactly what bringing relationships into the path is all about, is understanding that whenever there is a crisis, you have the choice. You have the choice to either go the path of kindness or the path of ego. And you can change paths. You can choose ego and then, come back to your senses and say, oh, sorry, I don't know what I was thinking, this is absolutely, totally mistaken. So it's not like once you have chosen, there's nothing else you can do. No, you can always go back, but every moment you can choose. Either you choose fear, actually, even better than ego, fear. Because that's what it's all about. The general feeling of ego is fear. It becomes aggressive out of fear, it becomes defensive out of fear, it becomes controlling out of fear, it becomes overruling out of fear. It's fear. So, the need for validation is fear. So we can say, if we really want to put it in the most pithful way, like a pith instruction, is whenever there is conflict, we know that we have two choices, fear or love. So it's up to us. But, when you put it like this, sometimes it can help, I think.
So it's soul to soul, not road to road.
Absolutely. Another pith instruction. It's true that when we manage to say things in the most simple way, it hits us, doesn't it? It's easy to remember, and it becomes so clear that you don't have many excuses. You can't find many excuses because it is really that clear. You can choose wrong, that's okay, but I mean, you won't find many ways to go around it. It's either this or that, and yeah, that makes it a little bit more clear and more simple and straightforward. We don't always remember this because, there's lots of things going on in our minds and lots of arguments and, repetitive thoughts and, come again and again. Oh, he really did this and he said that and the other, 3 years ago he did the same thing again and then when it calms down and we manage to, breathe deeply a few times, and if we ponder and, calmly calm ourselves down, then we see that it is really what it boils down to. Either we let fear win and become possessive, aggressive, defensive, or all these things that are extremely painful and don't do any good to anyone, or we just choose the other way, the soft way, the kind way, the open-hearted way, and let go of fear and understand that ultimately there is nothing to defend because it's all a misunderstanding, and and slowly come to this understanding, and then things become easier, and we can truly bring relationships and any other thing for the matter to become a way to train and a way to apply the teachings and our understanding and our experience into the path. And and it makes it all very exciting. Because living then becomes an adventure, and even when we are wrong and we do bad things or say things that we shouldn't have done or said or whatever, still is a learning curve. Suffering happens anyway. I mean, we are alive, so it's difficult to not have suffering. But if it can become a source of teachings, a source of experience, something that we gain as human beings from this experience, and then something that we can also share with others, then it's fine. What's the problem? Well, it's perhaps not very pleasant while it's happening, but then afterwards we can understand that it had this function, and it was actually quite allowed us to mature. And in order to be a grown-up person, an adult, we have to mature. And maturing means accepting a certain deal of ordeals and difficulties and not just pushing them away, especially putting them in someone else's plate. So I don't know. It's 4 o'clock. Do you want a 4 o'clock tea?